Okay, we're up and recording. Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me on a Thursday afternoon. If you're like me, you want to go take a nap. That's all right. We got to get through some stuff here. Hopefully this is not super boring to you because I like this stuff. It's kind of interesting to me, so that's why I teach it, right? Okay, I just shared with you a Nearpod link. If you can jump on the Nearpod, that's always great. Remember, this session is being recorded for learning purposes. Have it right here. Expectations, make sure you're following with the Nearpod lesson. I think it's really good to do that just so you can answer questions or whatever, but I understand other people are here and there and everywhere, maybe doing this from their phone or something. I don't know. But anyways, make sure you're trying to follow along. Use the chat tool respectfully and appropriately. Respond to questions and instructions the first time. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, we're talking about corrections, but there's two different kind of courts. Okay, there's what we call the civil court system, right? That deals with like family law, divorce, child custody, that kind of stuff. And then there's criminal stuff that deals with like a lot bigger stuff like murder, theft, arson, all those things. Okay, the things we talked about in our introduction to criminal justice class, which you haven't taken that yet. I'm going to teach you the next block. Make sure you jump in it. Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to be talking, the difference about the two. So given quizzes in the OLS, students will accurately answer multiple choice questions about civil and criminal cases with 80% accuracy across one trial. Okay, before we get into the actual lesson, let's just go to where we are at. So remember, always I just post the recording right here to the announcements if you need it. If we jump over to the calendar here, we got our live class on Thursday. Next week is Thanksgiving break, so no worries about getting on then. I've canceled that class. So that means our assignments are actually not due for like 2 weeks. So you do have some time to do these, but might as well do them quickly, get them over with before even this weekend. Okay, we'll have live class again on Thursday the 1st. A couple more live classes, a couple more things are due. We'll have winter break, and then the end of the block, you have to have everything done by the 12th. As we go into, and this is in the content tab right here, we'll go to number 3. We actually have 2 assignments this week. I'm sorry. It won't be too bad. We have the lesson 3 quiz, which we're going to be going over at the very end of class. So if you stick around, you'll probably get some hints and some tips of how to get a good score on that. Okay. And then also you have the mid-course reflection. This is basically writing down 100 words or less, or 100 words or more, I guess, not less. What you have basically learned so far in the class. Okay, so I'm not going to do a unit by unit, but we went over the history of law, the Bill of Rights, civil and criminal law. What have you learned? And then also civil and criminal law. So like, what have you learned so far? There has to be at least something, right? So something that you can put down there, text in there, and go from there. Okay. And then, as I said, the quiz will be going over 10 questions. Not that bad. I'll go over each and every one of them. So you're on track. Okay, next. So we talked about the objective. Let's jump into it. Okay, civil and criminal cases. So let's talk about this one. The U.S. criminal justice system has been very clear ruling that citizens need to follow. Where there are disputes about these laws or individual violations, these rules, they may find themselves involved in a civil or criminal case. What happens during the course of civil and criminal cases? Okay, that's what we'll kind of talk about a little bit. We're going to actually dive into that more next class. But in this unit, you will learn about the people involved in civil and criminal cases and the processes and types of trials. So we'll kind of distinguish between the two of those. So what we're going to do, we're going to watch a quick video in regards to both of these. Then we'll go on.
Let's have a closer look at the differences between civil law and criminal law. In civil cases, the plaintiff, the party that brings the lawsuit or action, is a private party, such as an individual or a business. In criminal law, the plaintiff, also called the complainant in this context, is the government or the state, which acts as the prosecution. In both civil and criminal cases, the defendant is a private party. Again, either an individual or an organization. In order for a plaintiff to prevail in a civil lawsuit, there has to be a preponderance of evidence that supports the case and its alleged facts. The burden of proof is more stringent in criminal law. In criminal law, the test of evidence required is beyond a reasonable doubt. This makes it more difficult to secure a conviction, which, however, makes sense given that criminal sanctions can be more drastic than civil sanctions. In civil cases, the sanctions or remedies typically consist of either damages, injunctions, equitable remedies such as specific performance, or even a combination thereof. In criminal law, some of the main sanctions include incarceration or prison, fines and penalties, or even execution. Finally, civil and criminal law differ in certain respects when it comes to the underlying societal goals or public policies. Civil law is about compensation, first and foremost, but also about deterrence of future misconduct, and, to some extent, punishment. Punishment is normally not an important element of civil law, with the exception, however, of punitive damages in tort cases. Criminal law is normally not about compensation. Here, the strong emphasis lies on specific and general deterrence, that is, preventing the defendant as well as others from offending again. Additionally, criminal law has a strong punitive element. In the same vein, criminal law is said to have certain signaling and expressive functions. Society uses criminal law to convey social meanings and norms, making it clear that certain types of behavior are regarded as particularly reprehensible.
All right. Sorry about that. The very bottom there, you can't really see it, but it says society and public policy, but under the civil one, it talks about the punishment is more like fines and stuff like that, or getting money. For example, my brother and sister-in-law, they bought a lot of land to build on. They did not disclose that underneath the land there was a whole bunch of debris that was put there. When they started to go digging for the house, they found out that it was unbuildable. The city said it was unbuildable. So they had to take the person to court, and they got their damages back, right? So they got money back. So in a criminal case, if something was criminal, like, for example, somebody was to kill somebody else, right? It's going to be a huge punishment, right? Usually with fines, incarceration, all kinds of stuff like that. So this class talks more about the criminal side of things, just because it's about corrections and going to the corrections facility. But you got to be keeping aware that you can actually be tried for both civil and criminal. So kind of interesting. Okay, let's talk about a civil case so you can kind of get the difference. So this is a famous civil case and controversial too. So civil cases in the last few decades was the case of Blk versus McDonald's restaurants. Yep, we're talking about McDonald's with the golden arches there, okay? Which involved McDonald's coffee. In 1994, an elderly woman purchased a cup of coffee from the McDonald's drive-thru, but spilled it on her lap. The coffee caused third-degree burns. The woman claimed McDonald's was at fault for serving her hot coffee. So she sued McDonald's, claiming that the coffee was hotter than the drive-through, hotter through the drive-through than it was when purchased inside the restaurant, and that is this hotter temperature caused wounds she suffered. A judge initially awarded the woman nearly $3 million, but the amount was reduced upon appeal. Okay. So, what do you guys think? That's a very, $3 million for a simple cup of coffee. Now, it was a pill and they didn't get as much as $3 million, but I'm sure the settlement was still fairly good. What do you guys think? Put your thoughts in there, those that are on the Nearpod, or if you got on the Nearpod, there. So somebody said, I know she got 3-degree burns, but still, it was just for a simple cup of coffee. Okay. And right, and I guess, don't you coffee drinkers out there want it hot, right? Or if you drink hot chocolate, right, you'd want it hot. I don't know. What do you guys think? Yep, somebody said coffee's meant to be hot. What are some other thoughts here? To me, it seems a little silly, but at the same time. So we say it's plain entitlement. So there's some political undertones to this as well. Some judges that make these things, because judges are like, this doesn't have to be up beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Like it would in a criminal case. In a civil case, it's a preponderance of evidence. So what some judges do is they want to make like these places like McDonald's, make sure they're following safety guidelines, right? And so it's more of a, hey, this is like a hit on the wrist to say, get your system in order to be safe for the public, right? So it's kind of a deterrent. We have some questions out there.
So basically what you're saying is that it's meant to be a form of control. It's meant they're basically using it as an excuse for them to say, get your act in order, or something worse is gonna happen.
Yeah, so that's what the judge is kind of doing there when you get
that makes way more sense that it was mainly them humoring them because it ended up serving a bigger purpose. I can agree with that more in that vein of things, rather than being just because some random person ended up getting spilling coffee over the lap, which again you have to take into account apparently third-degree burns and those are serious, but I personally can't see just because you spilled coffee on your lap and ended up, actually burning you to that degree that it actually, again, it's one of those cases where I think it depends on how well you know the person and so on. I don't know this person like at all, so I'm like, why would you pay $3 million just for that?
Yeah, it's more upon McDonald's saying, get your act together, right? So
yeah,
they just won the lottery a little bit, right? They got some money out of it. So let me just go to some of these comments right here that people posted. Somebody said, I think 3 million is a bit over because coffee is supposed to be hot. She should have known better, right? Well, and what this prompted too, right, is it prompted McDonald's, if you see on their cups with hot chocolate or coffee, it says caution hot, right? So I don't know if people read it.
the caution hot point is pretty much the legal liability waiver. I assume it's basically them legally waiving that, kind of in a way, the responsibility of any kind of damages ensued by it being hot because they warned you. It's your fault that you ignored that warning and so on.
Exactly. Okay, here's some other comments. It's coffee. It's going to be hot. You need to let it sit. They make it that hot on purpose. It's not right. 3rd-degree burns are extreme. No coffee should be that hot. Yeah, I guess so. Like I should have a 3rd-degree burns because of tons of damage. Okay. Yeah, like I sympathize both ways, but you can just kind of see that would be an example of a civil case. Okay. So this is how a civil case would go. Civil cases are those that involve disputes between individuals. They usually involve money, business, real estate, and other properties or personal injury. They also encompass family law, such as divorce courts, custody hearings, and estate cases. For example, you might bring a civil case against an individual who injured you in a car accident. So this is what kind of happens, the process here. Timeline, there's what's called initial pleading, which is the complaint and summons. So they go in, they say, this is what's going on, right? Then there's a pretrial. A pretrial is discovery period and deposition. So really at this point in time, they're trying not to go to court because it's expensive and it's long to go to court. And the biggest winners become the attorneys, right? So if they can get things in deposition and work things out there, kind of mediator to solve things, that's the best way to do it. But they have to go to court. They can go to civil trial, bench trials, jury trials, and damages. The bench trial is where the judge makes the ruling. A jury is where a jury comes, and then they discuss that, and you may win, but no, sometimes you don't even win damages, right? It says, yep, you're right. We'll pay your attorney's fees, and that's it, right? There may be some other damages that they pay.
Isn't that like part of why people don't like taking things to court, because it's just plain expensive and there's no guarantee you'd even get a return on that money?
That's true.
The only people that ever consistently get a return on that are the people that work in law, like lawyers and so on.
Yeah. So if you take it to trial, right, you better be guaranteed that you're going to win, right? So with my sister's case, right, where I talked about how the person wouldn't settle out of court, so they had to actually go to a trial, and they did win, and they did get the damages, right? Which was nice, right? Their attorney fees plus the damages. And then you got the post-trial, which is the verdict, and it could, if things were done right, it could lead to criminal cases. So let's talk about a criminal case. So here's an example of a criminal case. Bobby's uncle was arrested for fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit fraud, and mail fraud. Bobby's aunt was also arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud and for being an accessory. Bobby was confused by everything that had happened to his family, and he wanted to find out what was going on. He decided to do some research about what had happened to his aunt and uncle, or what's going to happen to his aunt and uncle next. Crime in the United States is high compared to other nations. The rates of robbery is nearly twice as much as in Canada or France. The rate of homicide in the U.S. is nearly 7 times that of other nations. And the American people are now more than ever aware of all of this. We can see that on the everyday news, and many of our lives have been affected by crime in some way, whether it is the increased use of surveillance cameras or having something stolen from us. But how do we as a society control crime? The United States has a complex legal system that serves to prevent crime and to protect the people, okay? So it is kind of interesting that we have so many crimes, right? So many people.
Well, I think part of that is from the very nature of what America was founded on, and that is freedom. And that doesn't come across as much nowadays, I don't think. It's not as much as it's not really the land of the free as much as it used to be, I don't think.
Yeah, we've got very law-based, right? Like,
yeah,
there's so many people. So, for example, when they started the war on drugs in the 1980s, that's when we got a ton of people that have been incarcerated, right? A lot of countries do not incarcerate people for the war on drugs, right? I mean, they think of it as, you know, somebody gets addicted, that kind of stuff. Though I think most of the people in there that are non-violent, they're usually, you know, have done, you know, basically were on drugs at the time when they committed a crime, or they were dealing drugs, or they had possession, right? So it's kind of interesting. But let's look at the classification of crimes here. Another purpose for the U.S. justice criminal system is to classify the type of severity of the criminal offense. Crimes can be classified over types of offenses, such as crimes against a person or crimes against property, or by the amount of punishment each offense is worth. Crimes are divided into felonies, misdemeanors, and violations. So felonies being the highest, right, are crimes of the more serious nature and punishment by a year or more in prison. An example of a felony is murder. Misdemeanors are crimes are those that are not as severe as a felony, and punishment is usually less than a year in jail or a monetary fine. An example of a misdemeanor is public intoxication. Then you have violations. Violations are small legal infractions and usually only result in monetary fines. Most traffic crimes are an example of a violation, such as speeding. I've got some violations in my life, right? And then the last one's liability, is a state of being responsible for a behavior or action or another individual, right? So being liable. So if you are under the age of 18, your parents are still liable for you, okay?
Don't most people, once they get to a certain age, like your age, have a couple violations? That's typically how some people's like a fake ID is found, or if, you know, fake identification, or, you know, fake history, is that it's too clean. You don't have enough. You don't have any like infractions like that. You know, like speeding tickets and so on. That's typically an indication that something's off.
Yeah. Yep. So the role in a criminal case, you have a bunch of different players that kind of go there. Okay. So for example, the police find an offender and gather the evidence pertaining to the crime. They make their arrest, and they will also be witness during the trial. The defendant is the accused offender. He is assisted throughout the trial process by his defense attorney. So he's the one that's doing it. The principals, okay, principal is in criminal offenses, the person or persons who are directly responsible for the crime are known as the principal in the first degree. They are the ones who plan and executed the offense. A second type of principal is also known as a principal in the second degree. These offenders are present when the crime is committed, but they don't actually participate in the main crime, okay? So maybe like a getaway vehicle, right? Think about it that way. Next one's accessories. Accessories are before the fact, is an individual who aids another in committing a crime before the crime is committed. Some other rules, we got the victims. The victims have several rights during the procedural trials, including the right to be informed of a court proceeding, the right to attend the trial, and the right to be heard in court. The defense attorney prepares and assists the offender throughout the trial. The prosecuting attorney argues on behalf of the victim in the trial, in the criminal trial. And that's usually an attorney from like the state or the Justice Department, the Attorney General's office, with there's account like Weber County Attorney General office, or the state or the federal. Witnesses are those people who are give testimony, statements under oath about what they saw in the crime and what occurred and what they know happened. Lastly, a couple other ones are the jury. The jury is 12 impartial individuals who are given the task of deciding what actually happened and whether the offender is a guilty party. And the judge, they act as a moderator For all actions that occur within the trial, they ensure that the actions of both attorneys fall within the parameters of the legal code. They can be also outline the necessary corrections if a guilty verdict is delivered. So as we go through, the first thing is the criminal case process. So you have an investigation and arrest. The first step is the criminal case and investigation. After the crime is committed, it comes to the attention of the local authorities. They will compile evidence, scientific witnesses, eyewitnesses, financials, etc. Other officers investigate the factual evidence, even the conviction of a judge to issue a warrant. When a person is arrested, they must read their rights. These rights are commonly referred to as Miranda rights. As we talked about the Bill of Rights, right? The Fourth Amendment is the Miranda rights are in there. Then you have the initial preliminary hearing. During this, the stage of the course, the prosecuting attorney brings the evidence against the defendant, attempting to convince the judge that they have enough evidence to go against and justifies a true full trial. The arraignment is an indictment. Arrangement is held. During this arraignment, the defendant can enter a plea, or whether they answer that they're guilty or not guilty. A date of the trial is set. If the offender is guilty, they will move directly to the sentencing. So they can skip all the trial part and just say, "Yep, I did it," and they just go to that part. The next one's the plea bargain. Involves the offender and their attorney agreeing to the conditions set forth by the prosecuting attorney in order to secure a lighter sentence or dropping the charges, the greater amount of the charges. Criminal trial. So a trial involves the process of each side presenting their cases and evidence, letting an impartial group of people, which is the jury, decide which side argues are accurate. Criminal trials contain certain steps: opening statements, evidence, closing arguments, instructions to the jury, and verdict. And then the evidence is collected and facts are proved or disproved on particular points. And that's where it goes, right? And then it's sentencing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump to the quiz. And if you want to run through this with me, that might be a good idea for you. And we're just going to go through these kind of questions. So in the case of Lebec versus McDonald's, while Lebec won the initial case, McDonald's reduced the amount she was rewarded on appeal. Ultimately, the final amount she was paid was agreed outside of court. This is an example of, would it be a summary judgment, settlement, disposition?
Is it a settlement? But it's a payment? Or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah.
A settlement paid out of court, and it's typically a monetary payment.
Yeah, so so you would settle things when it goes outside of court. That would be what you said, settlement. Okay, number two. The United States, a criminal trial by jury generally refers to 12 impartial individuals who interpret the testimony of lawyers' arguments to deliver a verdict of the case. What do you guys think that is? Okay, that would be something you want to think of. We did talk about that in there, right? Okay, the difference between a bench and a jury trial is whether or not the judge is present. Okay, would a judge be present at all trials, right? So you might want to think of that one, okay?
Yeah, I was a bit confused there. It was like, wait, what? We didn't talk about this, did we?
We did.
Well, my brain was saying, I don't believe we talked about it being, about a jury being trial, and it's like confused me.
Okay, we'll read the question carefully. During which state of the criminal justice process is the plea entered? Okay. You might want to go back to the Nearpod. And somebody wanted me to make it as self-paced. I think I can do that right there. Okay, so I think you can go back and look at the Nearpod if you're still in it, or there's a Nearpod thing in there. Okay, preliminary hearing, investigation wouldn't be an investigation, right? It wouldn't be the arrest. So it's either preliminary hearing or arraignment. So go look at it. Okay, what's that one? Number 5. Okay. Which criminal justice concept directly relates to evidence? Okay. Would it be like the discovery period, summons, settlement, or damages? There's a period where investigators need to investigate and discover things. Okay. All right. I think I gave good enough hints on that one. Okay. Which of the following statements about the civil suits is most accurate? Okay. Most civil suits end with a trial awarding damages to the plaintiff. Most civil suits never make it to trial at all. Most civil suits end with the trial rejected and the claims of the plaintiff. Most civil suits are tied to criminal trials, provided money for crime committed. Okay, remember when we talked about the process, you never know if you're going to get the money. So they're always going to try to settle it out of court. So that will give you a good hint there on that one. Okay, number 7. Under which exception can a police officer legally enter your home and seize evidence without a warrant? Okay, remember that unreasonable search and seizure. The police believe that the person has committed a crime based on eyewitness testimony. The police officer believes that a person in the home is harboring a fugitive. The evidence is in plain sight, so they can see the evidence right there that they need. And the officer has a legitimate reason for finding the evidence. And the person owns the home, has already been arrested by the police. Okay, I think I gave a hint on that one too. Number 8. Which group or person of the criminal justice case does the prosecuting attorney most directly collaborate with, since they share similar goals and will work together across many cases over time? The defense attorney, so that's the other person, the jury, witness, or the police? Think of it. They work together a lot. Okay, number 9. Tristan works in a bank. He gives the codes to the vault to Isolde, who then robs the bank in a night burglary. What role would best describe Tristan? Okay. Would he be a principal in the first degree, a principal in the second degree, an accessory before the fact, because it maybe happened before, okay, or accessory after the fact? Okay, I think I gave a hint on that one. Last one, it says, what would be an accepted punishment for violation? Death, 1 year in prison, prison sentence under a year, or a monetary fine? Think of it, it's a violation, like a traffic ticket. Okay, what would you get for that? Okay, I think I gave some pretty good hints there. If you do have any questions, please email me. We can go from there, and let me know if you have any questions. So I'll stop it again. Thanks, everybody.